Welcome back to Light the Fuse in this epic, some would say exhausting, look at the making of Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. The making and release, I should say, of Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol.
Sure, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So this is Drew Taylor, once again joined by Charles Hood.
Hello. I don't know if we introduced ourselves last time. Hopefully people knew who we were.
I hope they know.
Yeah, I mean, Ghost Protocol is amazing, so I think people are excited to
it's
be
just
exhausted.
it's had such a crazy... It went through a lot of things, and its release was probably the most complicated, I think, of all the releases.
Yeah.
Just in terms of, well, we'll get there, but yeah. You ready to just jump into it, Charles? We're covering production on today.
Yeah,
so,
let's do it. And there's a lot of production, so let's just jump right in. Production. All right. Principal photography starts in September 2010. They begin by shooting in Prague for a month. David James, who wrote the Ghost Protocol shooting diary, says... He also took the photos as well.
He did.
Watching our director, Bradburn, find his feet on his first live-action movie was amazing. From the outside looking in, you would have thought he had done numerous live-action films. He was completely comfortable and took charge from the very start.
That's great. Their production headquarters in Prague was Barrandov Studios, which was used during the silent film era. In World War II, Nazis occupied it and made propaganda films. This is where they did the camera tests and makeup tests. One of my favorite camera tests is the shot of Paula Patton with the red balloon and the camera. So good.
That's in the bonus features on the Blu-ray, right?
Yes,
see a glimpse of it.
Yeah, and it's in the book. It's in the book too.
It's in the book.
Yeah,
right. I need to get this book.
You got to get the book, Charles.
I know, you have it.
You can see Simon Pegg getting his mouth plastered in the Blu-ray bonus features. We now know what that was for. Originally, he had a fake tongue that he was going to pull out and reveal that it's actually C4 and use it to break Ethan out of prison. He was going to push it against the glass of a, where you go and talk to an inmate.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Like a room like that, and that's what's going to start the whole thing.
Yeah, and so if you see in the behind the scenes stuff, you'll see him getting his mouth plastered.
Yes,
that's why we now know. J.J. Abrams started shooting Super 8 a week before in West Virginia, so he was not around for the production at all. The first official shot they did for the movie was Tom walking out of the Kremlin and doing that rapid-fire costume switch. This was done at Prague Castle, which stood in for the Kremlin. This was the first film to ever shoot in the ballroom of the Prague Castle.
Yes. Isn't that interesting? We should go to the Prague Castle. We should do a live show from the Prague Castle.
We need to do that.
A local youth hostel in Prague is where they filmed the first stunt, Tom on the Ledge, ziplining off with his belt. For that stunt, they laid down a really cool mat that made it look like the bricks on the street. Crews could fall right off of it and hit the pad. Did you talk about how they were also right across the street from a film school?
Yeah, Bradburn has the little video during the making of where he's like, they're filming right next to a hospital and a film school. And he makes some joke about, if he zip lines, if he makes it all the way to the end, then he can land in the film school and answer some questions. Or if he drops early, then we can just bring him straight to the hospital.
I love that.
They found a decommissioned Czech communist prison an hour northeast of Prague that would become the modern-day Russian prison. They were shooting there in early October of 2010. From the production notes, the prison was actually the long-closed Mlada Boleslav prison. It's a very old building, and production designer Jim Bissell had to make it look high-tech.
It's pretty creepy.
Yeah.
So on October 9th, mattresses were lit on fire and thrown from above for each take during the prison escape sequence. David James of the Ghost Protocol shooting diary says, we had to evacuate between each shot to let the smoke dissipate, not just for continuity, but for health reasons too, since we were shooting in a very old prison with poor ventilation.
Cruz says, before we started shooting, I had them build a wooden structure at Barrandov Studios that replicated the prison, so we could go through the design and develop the stunt, and then I'd bring Brad in and get his notes on it and start adding more elements, so when we went to the prison, we'd start marking it out. Because it was really a 6-day first unit shoot that we had only 4 days to shoot. I didn't want to tell Brad that, and I didn't want him compromising anything we shot, so I knew that we all had to be on and we all had to be ready. When designing the action, it has to be towards the director's taste and storytelling. One of the things I did with all the stunt guys was I made them watch all of Brad's movies. So they're actually designing action that is something that Brad can get excited about.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Bird talks about the differences between live action and animation. He says, in live action, it is more spontaneous than animation, but the language is still the same. In animation, you draw it, but you're still doing close-ups and medium shots and all that stuff. When live action, you can plan to a point, but if you don't get it, you have to reach out right now. With animation, you can keep trying and keep inching closer to the thing you want. I remember Andrew Stanton talking about this too, where he was like, on John Carter, he just said, I want chickens, and they went and got chickens. But that would take months. You have to design the chicken and draw the chicken and put the chicken in. It's really an interesting process.
So after 5 weeks, they leave Prague and move to Dubai. On October 28th, 2010, at a press conference in Dubai, they officially announced the title of the movie. A week earlier, there was a report that one title being considered was Mission Impossible Project Ares. But ultimately, they went with what we now know as Ghost Protocol. There's a good picture of all of them lined up. We'll post that, of them at this title announcement thing in Dubai. They have a big, it says Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol really big behind it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. At the press conference, Cruise said, one of the things I always wanted for the franchise was for it to not have a number afterwards. I've never done sequels to films, and I never thought of these films as sequels. Paramount has done a great job in coming up with a title, so it's not going to be MI2, 3, 4. It's going to be Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. I always felt it should have a title.
And Ghost Protocol is a very fun title.
Yes. And you notice Top Gun is
Maverick.
not called Top Gun 2.
No.
It's called Top Gun Maverick.
Are these that's the only sequel he's done besides these?
This is Top Gun 2, or Top Gun Maverick, sorry.
Charles.
Is the only sequel he has done other than Mission Impossible.
Wow. As you've probably all seen, there's an incredible photo of Cruise sitting at the very top of the Burj Khalifa. Not where he filmed, but literally at the tippity top of the building.
Yeah, it's insane.
So here's how that came about, according to the Ghost Protocol shooting diary. Cruise ascended several flights of stairs to the 250th floor. From there, he climbed to the top of the building via a series of rungs that ran vertically inside a gray tube on top of the Burj. Joined by stunt coordinator Greg Smers and a rock climbing specialist named David Schultz, who is the guy that does not have any fear.
Oh, that's the guy?
I think so. The climb took an hour and 45 minutes. There was no air conditioning in the tube. Mark Wolf, who is quote-unquote probably the best helicopter pilot on the planet, according to the shooting diary, mounted with a red camera, came up and took the pictures, and they also took some moving shots as well. He got a call from the assistant director that Cruise was at the top, and they came really close to Cruise and pulled back to see the backdrop. So they would either take a really tight shot of him or one from far away so you could see all of Dubai.
From this helicopter?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they also
we can repost this picture. You can
Yes.
see it on our Instagram and stuff. You've probably seen it.
It's amazing.
He's just
they also put
he's casually sitting at the top.
The day before, they put a stunt guy up there, and they to see how close they could get without blowing him off. So they didn't do that with Cruise. They knew exactly how far away they could be. But yeah, isn't that funny?
Yeah. So from the production notes, Cruise actually autographed the top of the building, which no one will ever see, except maybe the guy who cleans it.
Yeah.
Is there a guy who cleans that spot? But yeah, pretty cool. If you ever happen to find yourself at the very tippity top of Burj Khalifa, you can get Tom Cruise's signature. The spot on the Burj Khalifa where Cruise performed his stunts is actually higher than the top of the Empire State Building.
Oh my God.
Think about that.
So Bradburn talks about shooting in IMAX. When we were first looking at the image of Tom climbing the Burj in the long shots, we could not see the traffic in the reflections when he presses down on the glass, but you actually see the glass warp slightly because of the pressure of his hand. You would never see that in 35 millimeter. I love that moment too.
Yeah.
That's so great.
It's amazing. The detail in that footage. Andrew Rowlands, the A-cam and Steadicam operator, says, "It's the heaviest camera I've ever used. Only in the past 5 years have they made a Steadicam for it. Being such a heavy beast, it's hard to finesse any dramatic moves."
And the film too is very heavy. Like when they print it, I was just reading that that the Inception reels for the IMAX presentation were 600 pounds.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So anyway, Brian Burke says the scope that IMAX gives you was something that really appealed to Brad Bird. In his dream version, we'd shoot the whole movie in IMAX. Financially, it is expensive. The cameras right now are fairly loud cameras, so it's hard to have dialogue scenes with those cameras present. Brad Bird is obsessed with film stock, and if he was making the transition from the animated world to the live-action world, well, why not do it in the biggest format we can? You know, that also makes those sequences really impressive, was how is the sound design outside. If they had to re-loop him and all the sound effects.
Oh, everything is, I'm sure they had to do from scratch.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Gary Rydstrom, sound designer.
Hello.
Re-recording mixer. Yep, amazing. Bird adds, "For me, showmanship has largely vanished from cinema. From the theaters and multiplexes to the fact that nobody has curtains anymore. They just project a bunch of commercials up there, which for me is like taking a leak on the screen. One of the few films that has still gotten that large experience is IMAX. It made an impression on me when I saw Dark Knight in IMAX. It's grainless, it's sharp, you can see incredible details."
And then there was that Dark Knight footage in front of this movie, which
Yeah.
I didn't talk about, but we can talk about that later. From the November 15th, 2010 edition of Hello magazine in London, there's some cool behind-the-scenes photos of Tom Cruise on the outside of the Burj on the 124th floor. People magazine on December 6, 2010 has a blurry picture of Cruise sitting at the very top of the Burj. They say he's sitting at more than 2,716 feet, which is very tall.
In the production notes, Bird says, I agree with Tom that when the real guy is there, you get something extra, and the audience can feel it. It's not just that you're seeing the actor's face, but somebody like Tom adds intensity to it because he's an actor. When he falls, he shows you the fear of somebody who's suddenly being dropped. It's a performance, and I think people can tell the difference.
Production notes, the crew was given access to the 123rd floor, which was still unfinished, to bring in camera rigs, cranes, and other gear. The glass got so hot during the day that Smurs says you couldn't even touch the glass. In order to shoot the sequence, they ended up removing 26 of the building's giant plate glass windows, which you can also hear in our Ellsworth interview.
He talks about them kicking them out. And
yeah.
stuff. Which Tommy Harper says they weren't done so cavalierly. Stunt coordinator Greg Smurs told the LA Times in a big article about the Burj stunt, we were in meetings and they said, Tom's not going to climb that building. The studio will never allow that. I said, Tom's going to climb the building. I guarantee it. When you're on top and you look out, people are going to think it's computer generated, and it's not. You have to see it to believe it.
Co-producer and VFX producer Tom Peitzman said, special mounts had to be made for the 65mm IMAX cameras. Special safety had to be put in place because in a building that's 800 meters tall, you can't run the risk of anything falling. Even all of us who are working inside the building, we all had harnesses ourselves because the window was open. Being in a building that high, it almost gave you the sense that you were in an airplane watching Tom Cruise outside actually doing it. So every single person had a rig on, which we've heard from a number of people.
Yeah. Smurs goes on, we spent hundreds of hours trying to figure out how are we going to climb this glass and make it look real. In Prague, we had a replica section of the building brought over from Dubai and built it on stage. We knew the temperature of the glass and where the sun was going to be on the day of our filming, and we put 50-foot tall lights on a rheostat so we could adjust them so it was like the sun.
Yeah, it was. There's pictures in the book too of that
the practice
60
wall and stuff.
Yeah, and they have markers too where he's supposed to hit. It's really cool. Cruise says we were dealing with a lot of issues, not only the height issues, but also the temperature issues and the winds. It can get so hot up there that it could burn me. So we had to really play with the different kinds of rubber, different kinds of materials with the wardrobe. A sequence like this, with the amount of manpower and craftsmanship it takes, and also athletically what it takes, even for training, as you're trying to figure out how we're going to do it, it's pretty intense. And then the aesthetics, how it's going to look. And they also had a wind machine out there too. Have you seen pictures of that?
Yeah.
It's like...
Yeah. Smurs adds, we rehearsed in Prague and never rehearsed in Dubai. We flew into Dubai and climbed the building. Kind of like a military operation where they're going to go in and rescue the hostages. They've never been there. They rehearse on a set, then they go in there. The only difference was, don't look down.
Ugh. Special effects supervisor Mike Minardis said, believe it or not, when you get to 147 floors, you'd think it would be really windy, but it was completely, most of the time, still. So we made a special 120-mile-an-hour wind machine, custom built. That went on an arm that stuck outside the window to blow on his clothes and hair. Ellsworth told us about this in our interview with him, and seeing the pictures in the book, it's just crazy because you think, what else could be up there with Cruise? And there's a giant thing hanging out of the building, blowing down on him. I mean, it's insane.
Smurs said, I can only imagine how sore he was. He never complained. He would hang up there for hours. He climbed, I want to say, 5 days in a row. As far as bruised ribs, there's just no way around it. Peitzman says, in one shot, we're looking up. He's running towards us. He jumps over the camera and then is running down away from us. It was done in camera with just a whole bunch of rig removal. I'll never forget lying on the platform that he was running towards, right next to Bradburn and Greg Smurs, watching Tom running down directly at us, 60 stories above us. It was unbelievable.
Whew. Cruise adds, some of the crew couldn't even go on the floor of a room where the window had been taken out just because of the height issue. It was too much for them. When I'm swinging from the building, I have crosswinds, and then when you see the shot, you'll see that I'm actually flying. I had to figure out how to do that. I'm on a single rope at that point, and when I leave the building and catch the wind, I'm actually flying and trying to figure out how to move my feet like a rudder to move across the whole arc of the building. Oh my God.
Insane. Paula Patton said, I'm not fully afraid of heights. By the third or fourth take, my head was out the window.
Oh my God. Renner's comment was, heights are more terrifying to me if you're on the third floor. If I fell out, I feel like I'd have time to call a few people on the way down.
Here's a quote from the production notes. These movies are a prop master's dream come true, says prop master Christopher E. Peck, who actually held the same position on Mission Impossible 2. We need to get him on the show.
Yes, we do.
So Peck and his team created the cool communications device Ethan wears while he's climbing the Burj. He says, it's supposed to appear as if he's using it to communicate with the IMF team, but we realized we were actually going to need a way to communicate with crews while he was going to be on the outside of the building. So we collaborated with the sound department to make it truly functional. He's actually online with the director and stunt coordinator while he's doing his climb.
Oh, that's really interesting. Another interesting prop was the Shaget, a briefcase meant to look like a slightly older version of a nuclear football. It's got all these solid-state analog technology that looks like it's a fail-safe, Peck said. There was little research the designer could do to replicate one. There aren't a lot of them around. The first thing we did was reach out to people who were in the know in that world. We contacted Sandia Labs, who have a really great museum with nuclear briefcases dating back to the 1960s. We looked at that concept and built it for modern day. And that's an interesting prop, too, because it has to be a weapon, because crew smacks them around with it.
Yeah.
You know, it has a lot of functions.
Yeah. I think they had to make a rubber version so they could, hit him with it. And
right.
stuff. On the Blu-ray special features, Peck talks about other props in the movie. He says the gloves and the goggles. What made those special was Tom came to us. He looked at every prototype, trying them on. This version's too tight. This version's too loose. So working with him on that made it very special. Of all the props, that's the coolest. He goes on to say the mask making machine is similar to the one from Mission Impossible 3. But the biggest difference is it's making 2 heads and not 1. The mask making machine is a prop that takes 3 people to operate. The image you see on the iPhone is whoever's face is being made. Brad is big on this. He said, I want to see that process, even if it's on the screen. Let's show the audience how that happens.
The original mask maker, designed by the dearly departed Sid Mead,
yes.
who just passed away.
He came in on MI3 to design that mask, and he was a visual futurist for Blade Runner and other stuff. And
genius. Absolutely.
Rest in peace.
On November 16th, 2010, shooting the dust storm chase had to be suspended because there was a real dust storm approaching. David James in the Ghost Protocol shooting diary says, at the end of the dust storm chase, Ethan stands on the royal bridge that leads him from the main road in Dubai to the Maiden racetrack. The bridge is normally reserved exclusively for the royal family of Dubai, the Al Maktoums, but they graciously let us use it to film the sequence. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. That's
crazy.
Awesome. According to IMDb Trivia, the sandstorm scene was shot in open matte Super 35mm rather than IMAX due to the fact that blowing sand would be invisible on film, even IMAX, because of motion blur, appearing only as a red fog. The enlarged grain of the 35mm film, when blown up to IMAX, provided the quote-unquote sand.
Oh, interesting. It was a lot of cardboard, from what I understand. The Indian palace scene was shot in Dubai at the Zabil Sarai Palm Jumeirah. You're just giving me this section because you don't want to. You don't want to. Yeah, you don't want to. The hotel was still under soft opening during the period shooting, which took 3 days. In December of 2010, so this is a year before the movie comes out, which is in the middle of the production, Bradburn talked to the Wall Street Journal about his move from animation to live action. He says, the basic storytelling tools, camera angles, pacing, understanding what a character is thinking, trying to present ideas in a simple way that's not predictable, all of it is much the same in live action as it is in animation. Iron Giant was roughly half the size of other animated movies in other studios, and Bird said that his experience of doing more with less has helped him on the new Mission Impossible. Quote, you're always working with limited time and resources. It's all about how can you deploy your resources to their best advantage before the clock runs out. Such a practical guy. That's
yeah.
Brad Bird.
I have a crazy quote from Tom Cruise about the production of this movie.
Okay.
He says, there are some days on this film, and more than any other films I've made, where I'll shoot the crew stuff at night and second unit during the day, and that happens 4 days in a row without any sleep. But I do it because I just love it. I love making these movies, and I love making movies, period. I mean, what a madman.
What a guy.
So I feel like I guess he was saying that Ghost Protocol was like that more than any other movie he had done, but I feel like all the missions are like this now.
I wonder why, though. why it was structured like that. At this point, they're done with Dubai, and they move on to Vancouver, which brings us to Year of Our Lord 2011. On January 7th, the Starsky and Hutch hood slide in the climax movie was a last-minute stunt addition by Cruise, which makes sense. He's always trying to plus it up.
Yeah. On February 17th, Tom gets behind a camera, and David James asks him if he'll direct. Cruise's answer, "My first love is acting. I started to produce films because they weren't making the kind of movies I wanted to make. Directing is a 24/7 job. I have a family, and my downtime away from set is their time." So we've always wondered about that, because around the time of the first movie, he talked about how he wanted to go direct something.
Do you feel like your downtime away from set is this podcast? I would say yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another anecdote from the production notes. One of the biggest gadgets, the Imf Train, is one of Bird's favorite sets. I think that's pretty evident. It's very incredible scene, right? Designed by Jim Bissell and built on the soundstage in Vancouver, the set appears bomb-proof inside. It's oval-shaped and designed to look like it's prepared to take a huge concussive shock and be a good command center for any situation. It's just loaded with all the special gadgets they could need, said Bird. It was full of all sorts of gimmicks, Bissell explains. Sliding trays for weapons, televisions that you could pull down off the wall and slide down with hydraulic slats that pop up and allow you to swivel them anywhere you wanted to. And you get to, what's great about this set too, I think you see a lot of that in the scene.
Yeah.
Which is great.
It's a pretty impressive set.
Yeah.
Also from the production notes, co-writer Nemec says they were trying to figure out a great location for a brawl at the end of the movie. They came up with an automated parking garage, which is a real thing that an architect friend had told him about. They looked it up, and Volkswagen had one. They spent 6 months building the set, which was fully operable. The structure held the 35,000-pound, 78-foot-tall center column, supporting two 23-foot paddles, which is what they called those moving platforms, each of which weighed over 3 tons. The completed set held about 70 cars, 18 on each level. The pair of actors were suspended from cables attached to the ceiling of the warehouse, as well as to the ends of the paddles to prevent accidental falls between vehicle platforms and to guide planned jumps. Cruise at one point makes a 3-story leap from a deck level into a car on a moving paddle, slowed at the end of his fall by a decelerator. Second unit director Dan Bradley, who was integral to shooting the sequence, says it was very challenging work coordinating their moves and finding safe places to set the cameras.
Oh my God.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Gives you an appreciation for that sequence.
Yes. Executive producer Jeffrey Chernov says on the Blu-ray, the parking structure, that set alone made me nervous to walk on. Originally, we built it on the studio and the stage wasn't big enough. Then we took over this massive hangar where they used to build ships. That set doesn't look that big in there because the hangar is enormous, but it's huge. The set was the size of a 7-story building.
Wow.
Yeah.
On March 5th, during the parking garage fight, Cruise is hit in the neck with a piece of flying glass. Here's a quote from Cruise. "I don't have time to go to the hospital. Just glue me up and send me back in to finish the shot." That's from the Ghost Protocol shooting diary.
I never heard that before. On March 14th, the scene with the fog is shot. This is the last week of shooting, so they must have been holding out hope for Vanessa Redgrave until the very last possible moment.
Yeah.
It's sad.
And so you wonder, I mean, everybody's been kind of coy about how close they got to getting Vanessa Redgrave. You wonder how close.
Pretty close.
Okay, so March 17th is the final day of filming. Tommy Gormley, who's the AD, awards Tom a $5 bill for being the employee of the day.
As we know from several of our interviews, there were additional Ed Wood-like reshoots that they did in Santa Monica. That must have been in the summer or fall. It was after the movie received positive test scores, but Bird said they could make it even better.
That's in the Bradburn Interview, which you should check out. It's a good one. On September 29th, 2011, Brad Bird tells the LA Times that Tom Cruise has, quote, "ruined me for everyone else. I'm not going to understand after this point why any actor doesn't want to do all of their own stunts and hang off a mile-high building. He truly loves the movies and the movie-making process, and he knows a ton about it." Bird goes on to say that Cruise is, quote, "made for movies the way Michael Phelps is built for swimming," which I love.
That's great.
It's awesome.
It's sort of interesting that there is no mention of our good friend Mr. McQuarrie in any of this. And there's no mention of Damon Lindelof. There's some key players that have been.
Those are kept out of the press.
Yes.
Do you want to just talk about deleted scenes, and maybe we can we'll start post-production and we'll see how far we can get into it.
Let's talk about some deleted scenes.
But these are your notes on the deleted scenes. And
so
if you take the lead on this one.
Okay, so let's talk about deleted scenes. Have you seen these deleted scenes?
Yes,
okay.
not in a while, but I have.
So there's an alternate opening that's really interesting with Hendrix giving a speech, and you think that he's addressing like a big crowd, and it turns out that it's him alone in a hotel room, and it sort of comes out of the mirror. It's an amazing
shot. Spinning around him too. It's awesome.
It's amazing, and it would have gotten his sort of message out sooner, but you can see why they cut it.
As we talked about before Fallout came out, we were always talking about how the series kind of had a bad guy problem.
Yes.
The bad guy's always a little underdeveloped. But they ended up. This would have helped develop him, I think, a little bit more.
But it also was a weird way to open the movie.
Yeah.
I think this would have been the opening of the entire film, so I'm glad they kind of took it out. So another one is Mission on a Train, and this was an extended sequence of the Josh Holloway mission that opens the movie. There's a really cool thing where the ticket has a little stamp that says IMF on it, and it runs through a reader on Carter's phone. And after that, the message self-destructs, and the stamp burns away. And you can see some of this in the trailers, but this is, again, part of that sequence where she cuts the guy's heart out and all that stuff.
It's in the trailers?
Yeah, there's a part. You see her scanning the thing, and I think the icon burns out in the trailers. Yeah.
Cool.
There's one called Confusion in the Van, and I think that this was just a little scene. Bird says on the DVD, the connective tissue between the set pieces was almost in flux. We punted all the difficult questions to Vancouver. We were in Vancouver, and we had all these problems to deal with.
That's when McCory came in.
Yeah, none of us could figure out exactly what was going on with the characters. It was as confused as we were. And McCory always talks about if the characters are in a car or in a hotel room, they're very easy to shoot. I think they reshot the Dubai safe house sequence at some point too. And then there's another deleted scene called Benji Almost Caught in the Kremlin. And Bird says, shot to up the tension. Tom was concerned we didn't have enough suspense, but ultimately I didn't believe a guard could get that close to the screen and it hold up. So this was in the hallway, and Benji is almost found out because the guy in the back, guard, he comes really close to the screen.
Which I think that makes sense. It wouldn't make sense for him to get close to. You could tell the screen if you get that close.
Like everything else, though, all of these sequences are very fun and would have worked perfectly. But again, Bird and Cruz are committed to perfection, and so they took them out.
Yeah. Should we get into some more things to post or call it a day?
Let's call it a day, and we can go back to it.
Okay, fine.
I'm sorry. I'm
sorry,
a
all you
stickler.
out there. We'll get into post production next week.
Yep.
But as always, check out our Patreon.
Yes.
I think by now we should have another couple more episodes recorded.
God willing.
Because this will be a couple weeks from now, so we got to do our best of decade.
Yep.
We've got other ones we've got to do too. What are we talking about? We've been talking about.
What have we been talking about?
We've been talking about doing one maybe about Nasty Piece of Work. The movie I did on Hulu. You were going to sort of interview me about that and talk about the project. As of course any news that comes up, we'll do Patreon episodes about that. And just sort of speculate on what's going on with the series and anything that's coming up. So go to patreon.com/LightTheFuse to sign up. For the bonus content level or higher if you want to do Skype chats and stuff like that. You can join us for our monthly Skype chat if you go to the higher level, the operations manager level, or more benefits for higher level. So do your thing.
And if you can't do that, if you want a t-shirt, go to TeePublic. We got a lot of new designs on there. A lot of different configurations. You can get your logo on. And,
we got the Ethan and Luther and Benji and Ilsa shirt. And we, of course, added the Brant edition because
I was right from the beginning.
There was demand for adding Brant to the shirt, so that's there too. Or you can get it as a sticker or a laptop case or a coffee mug. Every dollar counts. Every dollar helps us make the show possible. So please do that. And if you don't have $1 to spend, then rate the show. Especially Apple. We're almost to 100 ratings on Apple.
And just tell people about it.
Tell people about it. Give us a 5-star.
Yeah, there's
and spread the word. And follow us on Twitter if you don't already. Because we're always doing good stuff.
People are texting me about those ornaments already. So
the Christmas ornaments.
Yeah, they're loving it.
Good.
Yeah. So
that episode came out today.
Yes.
That we're recording this. Yeah, we welcome your emails and tweets and everything. Anything Mission Impossible, anything you want to tell us about the weather, go ahead and send us a message.
We are desperate for attention. Our wives are bored with us, and we need it wherever we can find it.
Yeah.
And we'll be back next week with part 3. How many parts is this going to be?
This is going to be 4.
We're going to finish that next week?
4 parts. No, next week's part 3. This is part 2.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah,
Boy.
I know, it's exhaustive. But this episode is brought to you by Jeremy Dillon. And
he's in town. We got to get together with him.
Yes. And it was mixed by Luke Burson.
Great.
So thank you all for joining us for this, and we will see you again very soon.
Part 3 coming up.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod, and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcasts@gmail.com. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.